Yo recap Rangers. This is a story about a sword god who once had no right arm and a body with no talent, yet he became the master of swords. Then he reincarnates, and when that happens, he will have his right arm and the best talented body. From then onwards, he aims to become the greatest sword master that history had ever seen. As rain is pouring down heavily, inside the mansion, there is a child who had just been born. Then the father of that child is looking at him with a serious expression, as if he was dissatisfied with something. The father then reveals while looking at his son, who is the protagonist of this story, he thought a genius son would born, but the child is nothing but just a disgusting thing. At the same exact day, the protagonist's misfortune had also born with the name of Kajin. This blonde child is blessed by the sword god's blessing, and was born with a blessed body and talent that is paralleled to a genius. As the protagonist's mother is carrying him, even she whispers to herself, Kajin would have been a better child for them than the protagonist. Only after a few days, the protagonist himself realized why everyone is showing disapproval, as the protagonist didn't have a right arm. From that day onwards, his mother whispered to the protagonist every single night that he is just better off dead. Yet he is smiling and apologizing to his mother, where he don't want to die because of what his father had said to his mother when the protagonist is still in her womb. The father believes the protagonist is their only hope, in which the father is gritting his teeth and his nerves are puffing out of his face filled with rage, as to how the father is unable to defeat his older brother. So he places all his hopes on his son to defeat his older brother's child. However, contrary to his father's expectations, the protagonist is born without any blessed body nor talent. Moreover, he didn't even have a right hand to begin with. After a few months, the maids are playing with the blonde child. They are complimenting the child nonstop for all his good looks and other stuff, whereas the protagonist's mother is watching this from aside with jealous, as to how the blondie has started to walk, yet the protagonist is still crawling on the floor. When the protagonist barely managed to take his first step, his mother is drinking a lot to cure her embarrassment, since that blondie had already starting his swordsmanship. When the protagonist started holding a sword, the blondie had already experienced Manhwa and started the family's great swordsmanship called the Samion swordsmanship, so his mother is still holding a deep resentment towards the protagonist. So that is when the protagonist began considering the blondie as a subject of adoration and envy. As it is snowing heavily in the mountains, a carriage is heading towards somewhere, and inside the carriage, the protagonist is now 7 years old wrapped in a blanket, where he was selected as the blondie's attendant. Everyone thought the protagonist is going to the main castle just to help the blondie as his cousin and to improve their bond of friendship, but the truth is, the protagonist's parents had sold him for 300,000 liden. As the MC is being tortured by someone, where his whole body is full of whip marks and he is crying in pain, the blondie is in front of the MC. He tied the MC to a tree and is using a whip to vent out his pent-up anger. The blondie is expressing that he never saw a loser like the MC. Then he started lashing out once again, and the protagonist comprehended that the blondie had never seen him as a cousin. Moreover, there are so many adults near the MC, yet no had dared to stop the blondie. Rather, they were witnessing this joyfully. Then he clenched his teeth and is bearing the pain silently, to use this anger as a motivation to get stronger. After a few years, in the main castle, the blondie's father was known as an incredibly strong man. Nevertheless, that man left the main castle a long time ago and never returned. So there is no one to control the blondie's temperament, and Blondie started to grow like the headsman of the family. As there is trainee who is sparring against the blondie is striking the wooden sword of the trainee ruthlessly. Then the wooden sword broke, and the trainee accepted his loss by raising his hands. However, the blondie's superior talent and the blessing on the sword became a toxin to him, so he never displayed any generosity towards the weak, and he just slashed out the trainee with his wooden sword. Then he calls upon the next sparring partner. This time he challenged the MC to a spar. The protagonist's name is Davin. Davin then wrapped his arm with the cloth, and as he headed into the field with eyes full of determination, he clashed his sword with the blondie's. But the blondie didn't like the look in Davin's eyes as Davin is glaring at him. So with unmeasurable arrogance, he just used his strength to blow off Davin to a pillar. As the blood is gushing out of Davin's back, the blondie is stomping on him without a break, and he expresses,
A loser with no arm dares to glare at me like that.
The blondie divulges, even if the MC were to train day and night without a gap, he could never put up a fight to the blondie. Davin's determination to win grew more and more as each day passes. He struggled a lot by mastering his swordsmanship, only just to prove that hard work beats talent. Whereas Kajin got lazy in his training, and he is indulging in alcohol, women, and drugs. Yet Davin is still incompetent of beating Kajin. The situation is like, the blondie was a lazy genius, and Davin is an hardworking idiot. But Davin hadn't lost his determination just because of that. He always believed their positions wouldn't remain the same forever. After a few years where they entered in their mid-20s, in an arena, Davin and Kajin were clashing fiercely, and Kajin just swinged his sword with full force, and Davin got pushed back a bit.
At that precise second, a molten, unholy rage erupted within Davin, his soul ablaze with vengeance, his eyes seared with a crimson inferno, radiating pure malice. With one savage swing of his blade, the earth itself screamed. The ground broke apart with a loud explosion, filling the blondie's vision with a bright white light. Feeling something was wrong, the blondie quickly looked up, only to face Davin, his aura a roaring blood-red maelstrom. His anger toward Kajin burned strongly, ready to overwhelm everything in his path. Davin unleashed a sword technique so ferocious it tore the very air itself, the atmosphere quaking with violent tremors. A deafening explosion roared, whipping the arena into a vortex of raw, suffocating energy that choked the breath from every onlooker. As the dust settled and the crowd pried open their terror-stricken eyes, they stood frozen in utter disbelief. Davin, the one-armed swordsman, a living tempest of wrath, had brought the mighty storm sword Kajin crashing to his knees, humiliated and broken in the wake of his unstoppable fury.
Until now, Davin's official record with Kajin is 21 matches and 21 losses, and finally at 29 years old, he was able to beat Kajin. In the unofficial matches, people always told Davin to give up on his dream to defeat Kajin. Although he lost to Kajin so many times, he never lost his will to fight, and today his dream has been finally achieved. Then the audience started to cheer for Davin, and he was deemed as a legend of the one-armed swordsman. Davin then speaks to Kajin.
How much longer do you think you'd be stronger, Kajin?
While Kajin is frustrated to get defeated by a one-armed loser like Davin, he couldn't accept this loss and this embarrassment in front of everyone. Watching Kajin in that pathetic state evoked Davin about his parents' words, as to how they always wanted to have a son like Kajin. He then states, if Davin is in Kajin's place, he would have never lived such a comfortable life like Kajin. Kajin wasted his life indulging in alcohol and women, whereas Davin gritted his teeth and trained like there is no tomorrow. Then he walks out of the platform after fulfilling his lifelong dream. And from what Davin had demonstrated, everyone has now started talking about the one-armed legend, Davin. At that time, Davin's eyes have widened. When he looked at his body, Kajin had just pierced through in the middle of Davin's chest, where the audience have completely stunned to look at Kajin's backstab to Davin. Without any anger, Davin just smiled, believing this are the final moments in his life. On the other side, Kajin is trembling in fear just looking at Davin's potential. Davin is feeling an immense pain from that stab, yet he was not mad at Kajin, since he won against him in front of everyone, and the sword that Kajin used to pierce into Davin's body is called as Sun, where only the direct lineage of the main family of Samion is permitted to use it. This particular sword contains the mana of the Samion family, known as anti-demon mana. So unless the person called Miracle Saint appears, Davin had no way to live. Davin then turns back with his eyes glowing red and declares to Kajin,
Kajin, mark my words, even though you might have stabbed me today, people would only remember you as someone as a pathetic loser.
Like that, he fell unconscious. In an underground prison, Davin is tied to a chair, rendering him unable to move, and he starts mumbling if this is hell, and ahead of him, there is a person with a huge body with chains rolled all around him, and a mask that looks like a demon. This man notifies that it isn't hell, and he explains how Davin had survived, where the so-called Miracle Saint was on site at that time, so she used all her divine powers to save Davin from his death. Although the saint had healed him from his injuries, all he can do right now is just breathing. He can't move any muscle in his body properly, where he can sense that his entire body is broken. The masked man interrogates if Davin had signed any contract with the devil, to which Davin is perplexed at that question, and the masked man describes, the only way for someone like Davin to win against Kajin can only be possible by him signing a contract with the devil. The masked man reveals that Davin's parents have agreed to Davin signing a contract to the devil, so there is no denying it now. Davin is shocked to death that his parents have did something so terrible. Furthermore, sacrifices and bottles of blood have been found at Davin's home, so everyone thought of Davin as a devil who just sacrificed 300 children in order to get stronger. Then the masked man pointed his finger at Davin and described, Davin is just a demon in this world. So young Master Kajin had sensed before everyone else, and stabbed Davin to protect the honor of Samayon family. So everyone started to believe Kajin must have been crying in his room for stabbing into his own cousin and a childhood friend. Davin, after hearing all this nonsense, began laughing. He is bewildered to hear that Kajin is crying in his room for stabbing Davin. He can't believe that Kajin went as far as to even make a false evidence, just so that he can prove that he is a hero who saved the world. The masked man then took out a paper, which is sentence for Davin's crime of staining the honor of Samayon family, and for sacrificing 300 people, where the punishment is eternal imprisonment. Besides, Davin will have all his tendons sliced off, and his mana will be sealed off completely. Likewise, he was dragged into the prison for something that he had never committed. He never knew the world is this harsh, that even if he worked to his bone, he is still considered as a loser. Then, after a few weeks in prison, Kajin finally came to meet Davin in person. With an expression of satisfaction, he states Davin is in his right place, and discloses that he became a sword emperor, and all the people are now praising Kajin for being a hard-working genius. Then he closes the distance and whispers to Davin that it is all thanks to Davin's sacrifice. Kajin is known throughout the world as a hero who saved the world from a devil. After Kajin humiliated and left Davin, the food that Davin is receiving gets lowered as each day passes by, and soon he was starved completely, without having anything to eat. Then he spat out a mouthful of blood. He is regretting now for not being unable to die on the arena as an honored one. Then he slowly falls down on the ground. Since his body had become weaker, his lips and his eyes have completely lost their energy, and he is pondering how what his life would have been if only he were to born with a right hand, from the direct family with the sword god's blessing. He just wanted to live happily with his parents, and to have that warm feeling of someone loving him. Leisurely, his eyes have started to become white. In his final moments, he just wants to live a life different from this one. Then someone is questioning Davin if he could hear what he is speaking right now. Then he opened his eyes, where a person is grabbing Davin's right shoulder and calling him Vincinadenka. Davin could easily sense the pain he is feeling on his right hand. His eyes have enlarged to believe that he had a right arm. Then the blonde in front of him is someone that Davin had never seen. Yet this man is in Davin's memories. He instantly recognized this man as an adult from one of the branch families. Davin is helpless to comprehend the situation at his hand. He imagines that this might be a dream, yet he couldn't confirm it, since it is too real for him to believe it. Somehow his memories are resurfacing and telling him that he is the Adenka's seventh son, Vincinadenka. Still, he appreciates this dream, as the air here feels fresh compared to that underground prison that he's been in. By looking at the window, he is happy to have a dream like this, where he had a right arm. He guesses that God must have presented this wonderful dream to him before he dies. Then that blondie ahead of Vincin gets irritated and yells at Vincin for not focusing on him, while he was blabbering for hours. Vican instantly perceived the mana that the blonde man is inflicting on him. So from all his experiences in his past life, he knew a method to propel this kind of attacks. Then he took hold of that hand with his right hand, and by using his left palm, he thrusted the blonde man by with a technique, where the man is blown away by that momentum. Vincian is apologizing to that blonde man. Even he himself is stunned, on which the attack that he used is not this strong. Moreover, the blonde man even has mana within him. Then he just explains himself, that his hand slipped in that flow, yet the blonde man hut off Vincian's help to get up. Then he states, even though Vincian is off the family, he shouldn't disrespect a branch member. Besides, this blonde man is declaring by sharpening his eyes, that his son will definitely crush Vincent in the upcoming ceremony. Vincent understood. This blonde man is the same as his father, where Davin's father had always wanted to win over Kajin's father. So Vincent realized that when this blonde man comprehended his dream is impossible, the blonde man must have started to project that revenge on Vincent to satisfy himself. Then the blonde man stood up without proper balance, and he looked back to inform Vincent that his son will take care of Vincent in the ceremony called Assembly of Swords. Afterwards, he sat down on a chair and realized what he is having right now isn't a dream, but something called reincarnation. Slowly more memories are starting to come back. As to how his mother had passed away after giving him birth, his father didn't even care about him even in the least. All the other children of the household had treated him as a scapegoat, and of the 8 children of the famous sword family Adenka, Vincent Adenka is the 7th child, and he was such a coward that he got slapped by his younger sister, and later cried in his room for that embarrassment that he received. He is just a duckling, abandoned by the others in the main family, and the branch family members are preying on him to get their revenge on the main family. So he grasped that the one-armed Davin is now an useless 7th son of the Adenka. He don't get the concept of reincarnation adeptly, so he gets up from his chair to learn more about this person called Vincent. Then he saw a diary and started reading it. He then gained information about Vincent, where this Vincent is the only weakling without any talent in his siblings, and the branching families are looking for every single opportunity to trample upon him. Even his maids and servants always ignore him, so he is fixed to die rather than living such an useless life. After reading the contents in it, which is full of bullying and stuff, he just closed the diary by getting aware of Vincent's life. Then he concluded that God had heard both of their prayers, where Davin had wanted to live in his last moments, and Vincent only wanted to disappear from this world, so both of their wishes have been granted. Then a voice inside the room is speaking, if Davin is really believing about God hearing their prayers. Instantly Vincent observed all around the room, yet he cannot sense nor see anyone at sight. So he asks who is one that spoke just now. Vincent thinks a demon might be trying to deceive him in order to stop Davin's reincarnation. The voice then responds that it is the real owner of that body, and Vincent now realizes that voice must belong to Vincent, and the voice agrees to it. Then someone from within the air appears. It is a teenager with blonde hair. He introduces himself as Julian. Since Davin had taken his body, he no longer calls himself as Vincent. Vincent now inquires how Julian is alive if he is dead, and even after his body had been taken over by Davin, and Julian divulges that it is called a revelation. Vincent heard about this in his previous life. That revelation is something that people who are blessed at birth can sometimes hear revelations. So Vincent's eyes have enlarged by that, since that could mean Julian must have become a god. Julian then speaks. He is referred as a minor god at his current state, where he originally intended to call forth a spirit god. Instead, Davin took over his body. So if Julian wants to ascend to a god, he needs to attain numerous achievements, and those achievements are referred as a calling. If Julian is able to finish his calling, he will then ascend to a god's position. Vincent then tells Julian that he has no intention of finishing Julian's achievements, although he understood Julian's circumstances. That is because Vincent is going to be busy in his life, so he won't have the leisure to listen some ghost wishes. Julian then apprises. Although he gave up on his life and Vincent wished for one, Julian's spiritual energy at this instant is very low. That is, if Julian disappears entirely, Vincent's body will die. Vincent doesn't care about those words and considers if Julian is threatening him. Then he checks his body's condition by grabbing his wrist. At that moment, he felt something horrifying, where sweat is pouring down all his face. Then he falls down unconsciously. Julian then commences implanting all his memories manually, where thunderstorm-like energy is being forced into Vincent's belly, and he is having an immense pain. Then he began to feel all those memories, where everyone is kicking Vincent like some scarp, yet Vincent could see the expression that Julian made at that time. Vincent then grasps. Julian is never fallen into despair, he just pretended like someone who had been into despair, while on the other hand, he is laying his groundwork for his revenge. Vincent is flabbergasted to see all these memories, where he can't believe that the thoughts of a 13-year-old are this cruel. Even Vincian, who had 29 years of experience from his past life, is sweating down. As to what kind of world had he been reincarnated into? Julian then smirks and inquiries if Vincian had ever seen acting of this level. Julian had no choice but to pretend like a coward, just so that he could escape his family's surveillance. And the subjects that he studied are considered apostle level. Then Vincian sat on the chair, and Julian wants to know if Vincian is ready to hear his part of the story and what he wanted to do, and it wouldn't be disadvantageous to Vincian. Vincian then nodded in agreement, and Julian started speaking.
If you know about the archdemon Davin and the hero King Kajin.
To those words that he heard, Vincian's eyes have widened with shock. He immediately gets up from his chair and questions about this so-called archdemon and the hero king's story. Julian then started explaining the story. About 500 years ago, as thunderstorms and heavy rain is pouring, the armed swordsman, Davin, escaped from the Samian's prison. And while using a contract with a demon, he devoured thousands of lives to become stronger, and it rumored all the world that Davin must have killed more than 10,000 people. And that is the reason why Davin is recorded in the history as a great demon, and thus called as Archdemon Davin. Now that Vincian had heard about this baseless story, he only grasped that he reincarnated 500 years into the future. He then scratches his head, where he can't believe that the Davin that Julian mentioned, and he might be the same. Since what are the odds for people to have the same name? Davin, Kajin, and what's more confirming it is that the both of them are from the Samian's bloodline. Vincian is certain that he died 500 years ago, where the Samian family had abandoned him, and when the one-armed swordsman has died, the storm sword Kajin became the sword emperor. But that story is fabricated, and they made the one-armed into the great demon, and the storm sword into the hero king. He just can't control his rage anymore, and slammed the table with his hands. Then Julian from aside is still explaining the story. He is referring the hero King Kajin's romanticism with his cousin Davin, which is wonderful to Julian. At that moment, Vincian threw the books on the table towards Julian, by mentioning that is some nonsense. Julian didn't know why Vincian is all fired up suddenly, and Vincian responds, it is because the history is all fabricated. Julian asks if Vincian is someone from that era, and Vincian agrees to it. And Julian then realizes Vincian must be really old if he is from 500 years old. Then Vincian cooled down a bit, and tells Julian to continue his story by taking a seat. Like that, Julian told Vincian everything about the great battle, where the hero king had worked with the Sun Sword Emperor, who is the greatest hero of that time, just to defeat a single person, who is Davin. Vincian then seeks to know about this new character Sun Emperor, and Julian briefs in. It is a person called Arslan, who is the founding ancestor of the Adenka's family. Vincian now remembers who this Sun Emperor is, by mentioning Arslan as a snorty brat. He is happy that someone who was a friend and disciple that Davin taught himself, had been a patriarch to a family. In the past, Arslan is happy to meet Davin, where he states that he admires Davin a lot, by clenching both of his hands with enjoyment. He speaks that he wants to be like Davin when he grew up, where Davin is happy to see a person who admires him, even though Davin is a one-armed person. Arslan visited Davin a few times when he is imprisoned. As Davin is inside the cell, Arslan is furious that Davin had never committed any crime, yet Davin is being punished for something he was framed for. By grabbing the cell rods with rage, he declared that he'll recover the honor that Davin lost, by bringing the truth to the light, no matter how many days it would take for him. From that day onwards, Arslan had never visited Davin anymore, so Vincian is pondering what might have happened to Arslan at that time. Julian then swings around the air and continues that Arslan is the first patriarch of the Adenka, and that Arslan had left a mission to the Adenka family. Moreover, that mission is also related to Julian achievements, and he reveals the mission is to surpass the Samian family and to face the truth. Vincian is thinking if the truth that Arslan is talking about is the related to Davin or not. Because Arslan is only person who knew how Davin has been wronged, and Arslan himself had said that he'll uncover the truth. So Davin confirms that this isn't a coincidence, as to how Arslan, who belongs to the Falker family, later created a family called Adenka, so Vincian figures the reason for that might be, is to recover the lost honor of Davin by letting the world know about the truth. Also, Adenka is a family that is created for the sake of Davin's honor, so it really a fate of Davin to be born into that family. Then he raises from his seat and concludes that Julian needs Vincian to fulfill his calling. Then Julian can become a god. Julian then replies, when he becomes a god, Vincian will have the complete possession over the body, and Julian might be able to bless Vincian an incredible blessing. Then Vincian grabs the sword hilt by appreciating Arslan, where Vincian will become stronger than his past life, and he'll inherit the mission left by Arslan to surpass the Samian family. As the both of them are walking in the corridor, Julian wants to know where Vincian is heading right now by calling him an old man. Vincian then gets a bit irritated about Julian calling him an old man, so he tells Julian to stop calling that. Yet Julian insists on calling him in that way by mentioning that Vincian is from 500 years ago. As Vincian got even more annoyed by Julian's way of speaking, he simply notified Julian with a careless tone. Vincian will soon forget about the achievement that Julian needs to do, since Vincian is an old man. After hearing that, Julian instantly caught Vincian's hand to please him, and from then, he started calling Vincian with his name by leaving the title, Old Man. Then the both of them heard some sword strikes as they looked to their left side. Two swords have just clashed into one another, and there are two warriors who are facing against each other. Vincian is now witnessing the martial arts of the people as to how much they have improved from the past 500 years. He is fascinated to see the Samian family's descendants, but all of a sudden, his body felt so heavy to him. Then he just passed out of exhaustion in that moment. Afterwards, he is meditating in his room, where he's cursing his own body, which is very weak. He just can't believe that he passed out of exhaustion, just after witnessing some matches. As he is preparing to control the body through mana, he sensed something in the mana flow of his body. Then he's instantly calling out for Julian by raising his voice. Julian then approached Vincian by yawning as he is sleeping right before this moment. Vincian then grabbed Julian's shoulder and questioned why Julian hadn't learned swordsmanship until now. Julian then replied, he had a disability for swordsmanship, so he never gave it a try. Then Vincian revealed, that is not some disability. It is something called heavenly exoskeleton, where it can be considered as a blessing rather than a disability. Julian then freed himself from Vincian, on which he's unable to process what Vincian is implying here, and Vincian then clarified, the heavenly exoskeleton allows its user to store mana in everywhere in Julian's body. To be precise, Julian can even store the mana in his bones too. As Julian is still perplexed about this, Vincian then explained to him detail. Normally a person is able to store their mana in their hearts, so a human only had one heart, yet there are people who were capable to have a lot of mana just from that. So just imagine how much mana Julian can store, if he can preserve his mana in his bones, where there are 206 bones in human body, so that is like having 206 hearts more than an average person. To be clear, Julian can utilize mana endlessly. As Julian is still not considering this as something important and is taking it easy, Vincian then yelled at him. The hero King Kajin, who everyone in this generation is referring as a hero, had also possessed the heavenly exoskeleton. Later sometime, Vincian is looking at his hand with surprise, as he was reincarnated into a body that had the same physiognomy of Kajin, whom Vincian envied his entire life. Nonetheless, he looks out of the window and realized the world 500 years later is more stranger than he anticipated. Just a few moments ago, Julian is expressing that he is incompetent of linking his heart to an imagery, and Vincian is co-founded about this new term called imagery. Julian then just got drained as to how he can explain things to Vincian. Then he said, imagery is a way to store one's mana. Vincian is dumbfounded that people of this generation aren't storing their mana in their hearts, so he inquiries about the meditation method used to store mana. Then Julian with a blank face questions back to Vincian about this new method called mediation to store mana, and Vincian described, the first patriarch of Adenka, Arslan had a great meditation method for keeping the mana in their hearts. In order to explain things clearly, Vincian is talking about how we store all our photos and videos in pen drive, memory card, and etc., where Julian is talking about the cloud storage, where we don't need to use any special physical device. We just need to connect our photos and videos to it, and later it gets piled up. Julian then briefs in. In the current time period, everyone saves their mana in the imagery, and call each one a star, and the number of stars utilized by a martial artist represents their strength. In addition to, it's been a long time since people had discontinued to store the mana in their hearts, and Vincian sighs down that he can't believe any of this. For the purpose of attaining a 1-star, the requirements are to linking an imagery for the first time, and one should feel the mana. At that time, Vincian unsheathed his sword from the scabbard and realized the reason for the current era to an imagery rather than a heart. Because in Davin's era, more than half of the people have died only attempting to store mana in their heart, because there is a 50% chance of it getting burst in their body. Nevertheless, Vincian is now slowly gathering the mana to flow directly to his heart by using Davin's method. And Julian from backside is stunned to see Vincian is collecting mana to his heart right now. As he is halting Vincian's actions, Vincian is assuring Julian to stop worrying, since one needs to risk this much to be properly known as an expert. Julian from backside is waving his hands and is questioning as to why Vincian is letting the mana flow everywhere, and inquiries if Vincian doesn't know about the circuit formula. Vincian, with a doubtful look on his face, turned back and asks about this so-called circuit formula, and Julian, with an anxious look on his face, explains, only by using the circuit formula, one can store their mana in heart, or else something bad might happen. Vincian then said, all the martial artists back in his era have just succeeded like this, and Julian realizes there might be people who have failed in it, and Vincian divulged with a scary look that the mana may get twisted in one's body, and it will burst in an instant if the flow is wrong. As Julian is completely worn down, Vincian disclosed that half of the people have lived by using this method, so it is an okay statistic for him. Now Julian is frustrated that Vincian isn't carrying Julian's body as a precious one, and always making rash decisions, to which Vincian just fell down on the bed getting depleted. In that moment, Vincian puts into question as to why Julian never cared for his own body. As Julian is confused about Vincian's words, Vincian then let Julian knows the heavenly exoskeleton is something that demands mana in order to contain mana in it. So Julian just starved the heavenly exoskeleton for the past 13 years. Thus Vincian Adenka's body will die not having reached adulthood. In the mansion, all the books and other things are floating in the air, as Vincian is training his mana flow and is currently using a meditation method to stop his condition getting more worsened. He currently has about 10 years of lifespan only, and if he wants to increase it more, there are methods to do that, but he discards them as he don't know how to find the materials or the methods used to increase his lifespan. As a result, he plans to focus on the gaining his energy, and later he will do some research to gain more lifespan. His mind now wandered back to his prison life, where he exactly spent 10 years in the prison without having no proper food and yearning for his life. Then someone from outside is banging the door harshly, and this person calls Vincian as young master. As Vincian is still pondering who might be bold enough to knock the door so loudly, the person then barged into the room with a serious expression. Then he is venting out his anger on Vincian for making a mess of this room, and Vincian is sitting cross-legged in the middle of the room. Then Vincian stands up by questioning if he is a servant, and that servant with an arrogant and disdainful expression replies, he is indeed the servant, and can be a master if Vincian is happy with it. Vincian, with a smirk on his face, then recognizes this person as Wilson, who Julian had mentioned, where Julian had planned to slit the throat of Wilson 3 years later. Vincian hurls the clothes that he wore just a moment ago at Wilson. He orders Wilson to bring in some fresh clothes, and Wilson needs to clean the room rapidly too. As Wilson caught the clothes with his hand, he grasped that something has changed in Vincian's attitude. Then he raises his voice at Vincian to know what Vincian had done in this room, for it to be in such a mess. Vincian responds, as to why should he bother revealing what he had done in this room to a mere servant. Wilson then yells at Vincian if he had gone mad by doing some random experiment in the room, where Wilson believes Vincian must have learned some dark magic. So he is warning Vincian that Wilson will now head to the Grand Chamberlain to reveal what had happened in this room, and soon the matter will eventually reach the Patriarch himself. Then Vincian, by sharpening his eyes, agrees that he had given more work than what the servant needs to do, but it doesn't change the fact that Wilson is a servant who needs to obey the command of Vincian. Yet, Wilson discards this as some nonsense that Vincian is spouting and reminds him that he already told Vincent that Wilson wouldn't do the things that he don't want to do. In that case, Vincent just snatched off the clothes from Wilson that he hurled previously, by stating that he will go get his clothes by himself. Wilson gets a bit uneasy about this, and asks where Vincent is heading right now. Then Vincent sneers at Wilson by turning back, to inform Wilson that Vincent is now heading to the Grand Chamberlain that Wilson spoke of earlier, to let the Chamberlain know that Vincent came there himself because Wilson doesn't want to work. As Wilson is getting irritated about it, he had no option but to obey the command of Vincent in that situation, where he just took the clothes from Vincent, and by bowing his head, he said that he will take care of the room cleaning service too. Vincent can comprehend one thing from Wilson's behavior. No matter how arrogant a servant may be, they wouldn't go this far by risking their jobs, so he concludes that someone is ordering Wilson to do this. And Julian then pops out of nowhere, and agrees to what Vincent had said. Yet, Julian is concerned as to what Wilson might do, since Julian believes Wilson is a gang member who murdered countless people, and Vincent, after hearing that, just laughs at it. Vincent then notifies Julian that people who have committed murder or have killed people, they will have a certain aura for themselves, and Vincent doesn't see nor felt any of it on Wilson. So he apprises that Wilson is too innocent to do something like that. Julian is now laughing at Vincent as to how can Vincent know of it certainly, so he thinks Vincent might be bluffing. Then Vincent turns his head back with a menacing grin where his eyes are spearing red-colored aura and let Julian knows.
That is because I have led such a terrifying life the entire time I lived in my era.
Now the protagonist has started his aura farming at last. I guess the real story is getting to start. And Julian on the other side is terrified of the pressure that Vincent had released right now. He is questioning himself as to what kind of deadly beast that seems far more dangerous that wind spirit had he summoned. After a few moments, someone is knocking the door gently. It is Wilson with an annoyed expression, where he is presenting the clothes that Vincent wore yesterday, washed with the best detergents. Vincent, with a wide and happy smile by sitting on chair like a prince, is appreciating Wilson for his hard work. As Wilson just put the clothes on the table, he recommends Vincent to cease making the room a mess like last time, where Wilson had to get strained from doing the room service, and Vincent accepts it. Wilson is imagining that Vincent might have become submissive as he used to, and Vincent now seeks for a wooden sword that is made up of black scented wood, around the length of 1 meter, and the weight should be around 500 grams and no more, where there are tons of swords with that metrics in the family storeroom, and Wilson asks what would Vincent do if Wilson refuses to do that. Vincent just simply gotten up from his seat, and is going to the storeroom himself to get what he wanted. Then he turns back by whispering, what should he do when the storekeeper questions Vincent as to why he came there himself instead of sending a guard? He reminds Wilson that the gatekeeper's martial prowess is not something to ignore, and they are extremely loyal to the family's direct descendants. Immediately Wilson extended his hand at Vincent to stop him from doing that. Then he grabs Vincent's shoulder to say that will he go there by himself, and before he could even say that, Vincent instantly backflipped Wilson completely with a domineering strength. Then he let go Wilson's hand and responds that it was just his self-defense since he had a lot of bad memories. Then he turns back and realizes as sweat is pouring down from all his face, that his body is screaming in pain just from doing that little stretch. Wilson from backside had stood up and is looking at Vincent with a serious expression as if he is ready to take down Vincent. Then Vincent released his murderous aura and stared at Wilson and questioned by strengthening his voice.
What? Do you have something to say, Wilson?
After experiencing that strong ruler energy from Vincent, he just mumbles that he will do as his master say. Then Wilson takes hold of the door by responding that he had no other choice but to obey Vincent, and he slammed the door to Vincent's face. Therefore he opened the door again slowly to apologize that it is not his fault, but the wind had suddenly blowed heavily. Outside the room, Wilson is frustrated to obey every single command of Vincent like this. As he is breathing the air heavily, he is getting riled up where he is planning to show Vincent that why he is called Wilson. With a commanding tone, Wilson just presented the sword like he is the one dictating here. He believes Vincent will have no choice but to take the sword. But contrary to his expectations, Vincent just shut the book he is reading and asked if Wilson knew about an incident that Vincent had did in his childhood, where among the people that Vincian used to have, there was a man with no right hand, since that man hadn't displayed proper respect to Vincian. Wilson understood Vincian's intentions, and right that instant, he presented the sword with utmost respect that Vincian had never seen from Wilson. As he is irritated to being treated like this, he is taking his leave from Vincian since his errand has finished. Now that he obtained a wooden sword for training, he is planning to get some training after a long time. Vincian is now striking a scarecrow which is used for training with his wooden sword. He is surprised to see that he is losing a lot stamina just from 2 to 3 strikes, due to the fact that he had a heavenly exoskeleton which hadn't been used by Julian since his birth. Yet this sensation feels good to Vincian, as if he was born to be a great martial artist, because Davin never had a body which is blessed. Then in that instant, his scarecrow is sliced in half by someone. This blonde-haired dude is apologizing to Vincian for the reason that he thought there was no one using that scarecrow since he sensed no energy from Vincian. Vincian asks who is he, and this blondie introduces himself with confidence filled in his eyes as,
I am Raven Adenka, and I believe you are that useless Vincian Adenka.
As such, Julian is apprising to Vincian about Raven. That Raven is from the Branch family, where Raven is likely to be the winner of the Assembly of True Swords ceremony. Moreover, Raven is the son of that blonde-haired man that Vincian met right after his reincarnation. It was at this time, Raven stepped forward, and he is emitting a strong energy, where Julian is advising Vincian to stay alert, as Raven is the most skilled one among the 13-year-olds in the Adenka family. And Raven speaks that if he were to win the Assembly of True Swords, he would be fighting Vincian at that time. So he came looking to see what Vincian is like. As Vincian is pondering about what this Assembly of True Sword meant by, Julian is briefing him about the ceremony, in which the ceremony is held between the Branch family members of Adenka. While there is no official age restriction, people usually participate in it when they are 14 years old. And the winner of that ceremony will be given a chance to fight with Adenka's direct family descendant. That's around the same age. This year, that direct descendant will be Vincian Adenka, where Vincian is determined to be the weakest of all the direct descendants, and no one in the direct descendants had ever lost to a Branch family's descendant even once. Raven is provoking Vincian that things won't end with wooden swords in the ceremony, so Vincian shouldn't be scared of their fight. And Vincian just responded, a martial artist would never be afraid of swords, yet Raven is belittling Vincian that he is good at talking since he is a direct descendant. Now Vincian told him by furrowing his eyebrows that even provocations ought to have some respect and dignity within it. Vincian is so furious because of how Raven had disrespected him. In his past life, no one had ever disrespected each other in training grounds like this, where even Kajin used to respect Davin when Davin used to train. Yet some fool who is still wet behind the ears is now insulting Vincian like this. Vincian asks Raven if those manners are taught to Raven by his father, who is also lacking respect to the direct descendants just because of his father being a collateral member. To those words from Vincian, Raven is frustrated now, and he pointed his sword at Vincian's neck and is warning him that Raven will not forgive Vincian for what he just said. And Julian from aside is advising Vincian to back down, as Raven is someone who is at the 2 stars, and moreover, Raven also possessed the attributes of a steel man. So obviously Raven is stronger than Vincian in any way right now. Even Vincian himself knew that Raven is powerful than him, but Vincian can't ignore the inferiority he is receiving from Raven, just like how Raven's father had also treated Vincian. So Vincian is gripping the wooden sword tightly, where he is strategizing to teach a lesson to Raven. Then he points his wooden sword, which is excluding a violent aura, at Raven and speaks that back in his era, there are people called elders who would have taken out Raven's head if they were to see someone insulting the direct descendant like this. From those words alone, and the aura that Vincian is excluding right now, a chill ran down on Raven's spine. He is baffled to see Vincian pointing his sword at Raven, when Vincian doesn't even have mana, and not even able to perform an imagery, so he is unable to process as to where Vincian is getting this confidence from. He can feel a tremendous aura from him, where Vincian could slice him at any given moment. Then Vincian just took the sword, and attempts to stop this child's play, as he believes that Raven had just got scared by a wooden sword, He forewarns Raven by glaring at him intensely. In the assembly of the true swords, things won't just end with wooden swords, you know? Now Raven's anger has raised to its peak, from receiving this much inferiority from someone who doesn't have any mana to begin with. He just launched himself at Vincian with rage, that he will be sure to kill him here today. Julian is telling Vincian to quickly move to his side, yet Vincian with calm expression said, not to worry about this, since he had already blueprinted everything. Likewise, Raven's guard instantly held Raven's arms, since Raven shouldn't fight Vincian in the training grounds like this. Julian now gets relieved after seeing that. Vincian indeed had a plan before he provoked Raven. The guard is advising Raven that if Raven now fights Vincian and hurts him, Vincian will only have an excuse to dodge the fight in the assembly of swords. So he suggests Raven to cool down this once. Then Raven openly challenged Vincian with his burning eyes that Raven will tear Vincian into pieces in the upcoming ceremony, and calls Vincian a scaredy cat. Subsequently, in Vincian's room, Vincian is reading a book and Julian is confounded about Vincian's provocation at Raven, where if there hadn't been a guard at that moment, Vincian would have seriously got injured. Vincian then threw the book aside and is notifying that it is only to teach a lesson to Raven about manners. And Julian is getting irritated about Vincian's decisions. As Vincian took another book, he saw something out of ordinary, where there a portrait of a girl inside the book. Julian then hurriedly snatched that portrait from the book, and he is changing the topic in order to divert Vincian from this. Julian now explains Vincian about the traits, where it can be called as artificial blessings or man-made blessing. Vincian is stupefied about hearing artificial blessings, because in his era, a blessing could easily make a martial artist a genius. Then he inquiries about Raven's trait, and Julian briefs in, Raven's trait is called Steel Man, where it is the blessing of the Dwarf King, and this trait mainly focuses on strengthening one's body. The more one grinds a specific trait, the more stronger paths will open up, and that is known as Tech Tree. Steel Man is a medium-level trait, so it increases one's defense and destructive power drastically. After listening to Julian's explanation, Vincian's mind wandered back to the Scarecrow incident, as to how precisely Raven managed to cut that target from a long distance, which is uncompilable in Vincian's era. So he concludes that if Vincian wants to uncover the truth, he needs to get stronger, even if it means using methods like traits and all. Then outside the mansion, sounds of someone hitting a Scarecrow can be heard. It is none other than Vincian. As he is seriously practicing without disturbing anyone, the servants of the family are joking about Vincian's training, where Vincian is panting just after 2 to 5 swings. Then someone from aside is telling the servants to stop talking rashly about the descendant. And as all the guards turn their head towards that person, they recognize this person as Vice Leader Merlin. This red-haired dude is the White Sword Unit's vice commander. He then questions the servants. What's so funny about the young lord of the Adinka family who is training in martial arts? The servants immediately apologized to Merlin and ran off from his sight instantly. Merlin then sighs down and looks at Vincian, even though he hadn't said that out. He too can understand why people are making fun of Vincian, where Vincian is really exhausted only from a few swings. At that moment, Vincian neither had any strength nor any trait, so it is obvious for Merlin as to why the servants are laughing at Vincian. Jelaine is getting embarrassed after hearing the whispers of people who are mocking Vincian for his low strength, and Vincian on the other side is just brushing it off, since he had been lived a life where everyone had looked down on him, even his blood-related parents too. No one at that time expected one-armed Davin to defeat the Storm Sword Kajin, but he did prove it. As he exhaling out heavily, he hadn't lost even an ounce of willpower from all that booing. It was at this moment someone offered a potion to Vincian, where the potion could easily breaks the fatigue and recovers his energy back. As Vincian is surprised to see Merlin for the first time, Merlin then placed his fist over his heart and suggests Vincian that it'll be easier for Vincian to train like this, and Vincian asks who Merlin is. Then Merlin introduces himself as the vice commander, and Vincian seeks to know why Merlin is not laughing at Vincian. Merlin honestly speaks that he too did laugh at first, but after seeing the determination in Vincian's eyes, he changed his mind on him, and states that people who laugh at people like Vincian are the ones to be laughed at. By what Merlin had said, Vincian is impressed and replied that he will remember Merlin's name. Then Vincian tells Merlin to go as Merlin might be in patrolling, and like that Merlin takes his leave. As Vincian began his training again, Merlin looked back at Vincian and is pondering. Something inside Vincian had changed tremendously. From that day onwards, Vincian, without giving any break, he tirelessly trained his body to push past his limits. Like that, he started focusing on mana, as he is setting his legs straight, and with a perfect hip position, he can feel the mana in his heart. Moreover, he started to see the one-armed Davin's path to defeat Takajin, or Davin's swordsmanship. As he used his swordsmanship, and by connecting all the dots, with his eyes gleaming with white light, he slashed the scarecrow with all his might, and it got cut precisely as how Raven did it. He is now happy to see the results of his hard work. Where the best part is, while Raven sliced the scarecrow in half with a real sword, Vincian did it with just a wooden sword. Inside the mansion, Wilson is annoyed to work like a servant to Vincian, although his job is a servant job. Then an idea popped up in Wilson's mind, and his smile got widened. And when he served the food to Vincian, by opening the cloche, Vincian is baffled to see the food inside the plate, where there is a certain item missing in it. He realized that this is Wilson's work. So he apprised Wilson that if he wants to steal something, Wilson needs to do it properly. Wilson pretending like he don't know what Vincian is talking about by blowing a soft whistle. Vincian then responded, if Wilson at least had some conscience, he would have wiped the food particles on his mouth. To which Wilson instantly covered his mouth, and Vincian now warns Wilson by sharpening his eyes that Vincian won't ignore Wilson's bad behavior anymore, and he hopes Wilson to not to cross the line. Wilson with a sweaty face, trying to scare Vincian by cracking some fingers, and is reminding Vincian that Wilson is a backstreet gangster, where he killed a lot of people before. Vincian then sent a telepathy message to Wilson that one can easily threaten others with some lies, but they won't have the heart that courageous people have. Wilson is not shocked about Vincian's words, but he is shocked to see that Vincian is using mana. Vincian then smirks at Wilson by pointing the fork at him. He replied that Wilson will see a lot more surprises from here on. As Wilson looked at Vincian with disbelief, Vincian then recommends Wilson to stop being prideful and stand beside Vincian, since Wilson won't be embarrassed to be owned by Vincian Adenka later on. Nonetheless, Wilson just went back and responded that he will never show loyalty to Vincian, whereas when he closed the door, he stood there in a complete silence. Then he mumbled that Vincian's coolness has exploded in that moment. As Merlin is patrolling around the training ground, he guesses Vincian might have left early today. That is when he saw something shocking, where the scarecrow is sliced perfectly. Even he believes that this might have done by a real blade, yet he saw Vincian training with a wooden sword only. As he touched the surface of the target, he couldn't comprehend what method Vincian had used to get this much stronger in such a short period of time. As Vincian is getting dressed up, and Wilson behind Vincian is politely working under Vincian without making any fuss, then Julian is chuckling at Wilson's sudden change in behavior, after what Vincian had demonstrated yesterday. At that time, Vincian observed something strange in his cloth, and he tells Wilson that his shirt is made up of Levidine cotton, and Wilson questions what is that? Then Vincian answers, the Levidine cotton is cost-effective, but it ruins the soil of a person, so he let Wilson knows this type of cotton wouldn't be used by a noble. Furthermore, the food that Vincian is having is also made up of low-quality ingredients, where the family's budget isn't even compared to it. So he finalizes that someone is embezzling the money, and Julian isn't aware that Wilson is doing something like this. However, Wilson is naively looking at Vincian as if he don't even know what Levidine and embezzling meant by, and from his expression, Julian and Vincian can figure out that Wilson is not the one doing it. Vincian then keeps his finger on his chin and realizes that someone higher up is doing this. In another place, someone is swinging a heavy metal. It is Raven, where he adorned himself 2 heavy braces on both his wrists, and is sincerely training for the ceremony. Yet the words that Vincian spoke to him can't be digested at all. He is gritting his teeth and is training more intensely just from reminding Vincian. Then someone outside the room is asking if Raven is inside. It is Raven's father. He understands that Raven's training going out smoothly. As Raven turned at his father with a serious look on his face, is alerting Raven that there is not much time left for the ceremony. Besides, Raven shouldn't forget the desire that his father had, where Raven must defeat Vincian, so that their family could escape this poverty. Yet Raven just replied yes to it, by looking at somewhere, as if he had no interest in it. Looking at Raven like that, his father grabbed his arm, and is engraving in Raven's mind that Raven must become the first branch family member to defeat a direct descendant. Raven just nodded to what his father said, where he could grasp that his father is getting more obsessed with the ceremony with days are nearing by. He is now strategizing a way to defeat Vincian, since his father and his family can go back to the way they were. At Vincian's room, Julian with a bright beam has finally completed the information on the participants that are participating in the ceremony. As Vincian is flipping the pages of the book, he is amazed that not just the participants' personal information, including all the moves, traits, and even their habits were noted in it. Where Julian is acting all high and mighty for what he presented, and Vincian guesses that Julian's original plan is something different, where Julian desired his previous body to make a flashy debut in the ceremony, by borrowing the Spirit King's strength, yet Vincian popped up instead of the Spirit King, and change of plans have been done by that. Julian points something in the book called Miracle Stone, where if one ingests this into their body and mana will both grow stronger instantaneously. Just by looking at Julian's way of describing things so neatly, Vincian could perceive just how much Julian wanted to win in the assembly of true swords. Thus Vincian prepares himself to win this at any cost, since it'd be a disgrace for him as a martial artist to lose even with all this information and help. Then he gets from his chair, and with a confident tone, he speaks that although Julian had hoped for the Spirit King's arrival, Vincian promises that he will give a more valuable victory than whatever the Spirit King would have provided. Then by ringing a silver bell, Vincian calls for Wilson. As Wilson opened the door by breathing heavily, Vincian then commands Wilson to do something for him. A lady is seriously writing some documents, and someone interrupts her. It is Wilson who came here on Vincian's order. He inquires if the lady who is known as the Grand Chamberlain is doing well. Without any change in expression, she speaks with a sharp tone, "State your business, Wilson." Just from hearing her voice, Wilson is shuddering in fear, because this lady is a 7-star martial artist. Then Wilson states, Vincian had a message to the family head, to which the lady is asking if Vincian don't even have the guts to meet his own father. And Wilson then disclosed the message, where Vincian wants his father to attend the assembly of true swords. By hearing that, the lady's pen had stopped writing. Wilson then continues, Vincian is going to prove his worth as member of the main Adenka family. As the lady is about to decline to what Vincian had said, since the patriarch would never bother himself attending the assembly of true swords. Wilson then revealed that this is to settle the score for embezzling the budget of Vincian. A person like her who had no expression up until now, suddenly shocked after hearing Vincian mentioning about the embezzling of budget. As she told Wilson to take his leave, she then joins both of her hands and starts to ponder that Vincian could have come here himself, yet he sent a Wilson on purpose, and this to show his authority. She then smiles and realizes that Vincian had finally understood her intentions for making the servants behave all high and mighty around Vincian. At some random place, a person who is shirtless is sitting cross-legged on the ground and is training his mana levels. Without even looking back, he recognized that the Grand Chamberlain had approached him. The lady then delivers the message that Vincian had tasked her to, as to how Vincian wants his father, the patriarch, to attend the assembly of true swords. The patriarch, with a strong voice, tells the lady to cease her pointless behavior and get to the main point. Then she reveals that Vincian said that he will be proving his worth in this ceremony as an Adenka family member. To which the patriarch responded, if the lady herself can believe if Vincian is able to prove the worth of his lineage. Then she places her hand over her heart and bows down her head respectfully, to state that Vincian had no such thing, and that is the exact reason that made him to display his worth this time. She is even willing to be a notary public, which means she will have to give up her head if Vincian won't be able to prove himself. The patriarch couldn't find out the reason as to why the lady is going this far, and she divulges Vincian had taken advantage over a weakness of hers. The patriarch instantly answers if it is related to the embezzling the budget, and she is surprised that the patriarch had known of her embezzling the budget. The patriarch didn't bother her, because he knows that the lady is doing all of this, since she had intended to save that money for Vincian's future. Additionally, the patriarch didn't involve in her matters, as she is the servant of Vincian's mother and not the patriarch. The patriarch is now thinking about his wife who had passed away after Vincian's birth, where she also had the personality of sending a servant to state her business rather than coming herself without losing her dignity. And now Vincian had also done the same thing. So he takes his shirt and declared,
I will participate in the assembly of true swords, so Vincian Adenka, don't disappoint me.
On the day of the assembly of true swords, all the branch family participants are coming onto the stage. As Raven is walking in the center of the crowd, he is determined to defeat Vincian at any cost. Then he saw someone at the special area, where he is shocked to see the patriarch of a Adenka family had come to witness the ceremony, which is something that had never happened. He is getting fired up by believing that the patriarch is here to witness Raven in action. I guess Raven might have forgotten that he is not the protagonist of this story. As the ceremony had begun, Raven is in full excitement that he is showing all his cards at disposal to impress the patriarch by quickly defeating an opponent. As he thrusted his sword at a shield-type trait, his opponent immediately jumped up into the air to finish off Raven, but instead his sword is broken by Raven's defense trait. Raven then aimed his sword at the opponent, and as he stroked that person, he was blown away by that pressure far away. Raven's father is brimming with happiness for what Raven is demonstrating, and even the audience are conversing to each other of how strong Raven is. Even though he is from a branch family, the audience are starting to consider Raven to defeat the direct descendant for the first time ever. Vincian from a side is watching their fight, and has agreed that all these people right here are geniuses, but not even a single one of them had any depth in martial arts. Since this era's warrior's strength is mainly coming from traits and all, they will have no experience from fighting, just utilizing their traits as they wish. Hence it is more like Vincian watching some puppets fighting in this. Raven then bows down his head to the patriarch, and by looking at Vincian sneakily, he sent him a telepathy message that he is happy Vincian didn't ran away in fear of getting embarrassed. While Vincian replied, he'll be waiting for Raven in the finals, so he better not hand over his defeat to someone. Like that, after a few hours of battling, some swords flew into the sky, and Raven had defeated the opponent, and finally remained the last one standing. He then announces to the patriarch,
I, Raven Adenka, have won against all my competitors. Now, as dictated by the laws of the elders, I'll be fighting my close friend, Vincian Adenka, as the last fight of the Assembly of True Swords.
Vincian then declares, I accept your challenge. As the referee is about to start the match between Raven and Vincian, he introduces himself as Zarin and alerts them to get ready. Yet Vincian raised his hand to say that he had some conditions, where he called Wilson, and Wilson is handing over the wooden sword that Vincian used to practice with. Vincian announces his condition, that he will only fight in this match using the wooden sword. Moreover, he wouldn't even use his right hand at all. Furthermore, he'll also let Raven to have the first 3 attacks. Besides, until the 3 attacks are completed, he wouldn't move a single step from the place that he's standing. As Raven's father is confounded about Vincian's sudden barrage of conditions, even the audience are baffled about this, since they always heard negative rumors about Vincian only. On which Raven is frustrated and yells at Vincian as to why Vincian is mocking him up until the end. Raven's father then stood up and is speaking to the patriarch that Vincian is wantedly doing all of this, just so that Vincian could use excuses after he lost to Raven pathetically. Nevertheless, the patriarch allows it, and he forewarns Vincian that he needs to prove himself with his actions. Vincian then accepts to what the patriarch had said, and the referee is now commencing the match, where Raven's nerves are bulging out of his face by that inferiority that he's getting from Vincian, and at the same time, Vincian on the other hand is maintaining his composure. When the referee lifted the flag upwards, as a signal to start the match, without wasting a single moment, Raven launched himself at Vincian to finish him off in one blow. However, Vincian already knew all the movements of Raven, since Julian had prepared an entire book for this ceremony, of the participants' every single piece of information. Vincian then effortlessly evaded that strike by just tilting his head to his right side, where Vincian knew that this is just a feint. Additionally, Vincian is surprised that Raven's movements are so obvious that he doesn't even need Julian's help at all. Then by flowing the mana into his fingers, he easily deflected that sword with his bare fingers, and said, "Great swords aren't meant for stabbing in the first place." Where Raven is completely bewildered to see his sword deflected so easily, he knew that in order to see where his sword is, one should be above his current level. And Vincian responded. He allowed 2 out of 3 strikes. Only 1 is remaining. Now Raven is getting riled up. Rather than stabbing like earlier, he instantly swinged his sword this time, where even the air is tearing apart. Vincian then grabbed Raven's right wrist, and by sweeping with his leg, he made Raven lose his momentum and rapidly thrusted him into the ground with sheer force. As he spatted out blood, Vincian ahead of him is seriously looking at Raven with his eyes glowing yellow, and he notified that the 3rd strike is now over. Now Vincian takes out his sword. For the promise he made to Julian and his father, Vincian is now going to show everyone what he is made up of. The audience, Raven's father, the patriarch, even the referee is completely flabbergasted by what Vincian had done to Raven right now. Raven's father is encouraging Raven to get up, as to how can he struggle against Vincian, who can't even use mana. And as Raven is slowing standing up again by using his sword, Julian is as well stunned by that outcome. So he is asking Vincian as to how he did it. Then Vincian responds, "What he did right now is pure martial arts. Nothing more, nothing less. It's just that this era is depending more on weapons, and forgot to train their basic hand-to-hand combat." Now that Raven is ready to face Vincian again, he is taunting that Vincian might have obtained a small minor god's trait, so Vincian must be embarrassed to reveal it. Julian is annoyed that Raven is considering him as a small minor god, and Vincian doesn't even care about this puny provocations, and now Raven is surging all his energy into this strike to take down Vincian. Julian is advising Vincian to move aside, since this not an ordinary attack, where Raven had crushed the ground beneath Vincian with that powerful strike, and Vincian dodged it in an arm's breadth. Now without any further ado, Vincian took a stance to finish off Raven, where Raven's left side is completely open, and as Vincian swinged his sword at Raven, Raven is surprised that it didn't injure him at all. And Raven's father is informing that a practiced sword could never break the defenses of a steel man attribute. Vincian is at a disadvantage, where he can't use his mana because the physiognomy has been starved for a long time, and his body is still not well trained, so he is unable to use any strong attacks. As Raven is back to action once more, in which he raised his sword to his back, and Vincian is taking this chance to create some distance between them. Like that, he used his wooden sword to stab right through Raven's chest. As Raven is pushed back into the air,
At that critical moment, Vincian's voice erupted like a roaring beast. His warning to referee Ziron is as,
Do everything to stop a disaster, or this arena will burn and brings chaos.
The referee stood baffled. His mind is struggling to process about the threat as Vincian launched himself at Raven like a raging inferno of fury, with blazing red eyes that glowed like molten lava. Raven is stuck in midair like a cornered animal. He is furious at Vincian's bold challenge. Raven unleashed his ultimate technique, a desperate strike meant to shatter his enemy. But Vincian, who is like a predator, saw his path to victory. He charged at Raven with devastating force, his sword moving with deadly grace, and a massive surge of violet energy exploded across the arena, the sheer power breaking the sound barrier with a shattering roar. Vincian's blade, fueled by his unrelenting wrath, sliced through Raven's right arm in a spray of crimson, his dragon-like eyes blazing with untamed ferocity. The fathers of both warriors stood frozen, stunned by Vincian's swordsmanship, a breathtaking display no one had ever witnessed. Raven's screams of pain echoed through the chaos, while the referee watched in awe. Vincian towered over the scene. His voice is like a menacing beast.
Must I take out his other limb as well, in order to be proved victorious?
The referee, shaken by the raw power before him, quickly shouted,
Vincian Adenka is the champion of this year's Assembly of True Swords.
A name now etched in legend.
in the Murim, there are 2 clans that have always fought each other, the Heavenly Demon Cult and the Reincarnates. Then a person appeared in this Murim world, with 2 swords on his back, and is on his way to engrave his name into the history as a greatest swordsman in the world. I have already made a recap of this manhwa. The link is in the description, so check this manhwa out, and I am sure you wouldn't be disappointed. Don't forget to subscribe for more intense-filled recaps. Thanks for watching.